Hey, business builders. I'm really pleased to bring you Randy Martin, the founder of Trailscape today. Randy is near San Jose, California, also a little bit to the west of Lake Tahoe on the border of California and Nevada. And Randy has built a company since about 2007, so over about 17 years, that builds trails, private trails on people's property. So he works with landowners who have between 10 and 50 acres to build trails that have a grade of about 5%, which is walkable, bikeable, up and down over steep mountains, down through little valleys, et cetera. Those trails serve as a recreational resource on the land, and they also serve as a fire break, which is something that he hadn't thought of when he first actually started building these trails. So Randy tells a story of working 70 hours a week and kind of gutting it out, tells us about his team today, tells him about the plan for the next 10 years, which includes looking for a successor, building value in the business, tells us about the marketing system that he used. Postcards actually are the best thing for him, although it's also important to be found online if somebody has the idea in their head that they want a trail. But the postcards are ones to incite action and help people see possibility on their land that they hadn't even seen before. So he tells us about the marketing, he tells us about the sales. He talks about his superpower as a business builder. He's very humble, like many of you. So he didn't necessarily come out with, well, this is my superpower, but I will tell you its groundedness is what I hear in him. And I think this is a really great talk. I think it's fascinating, interesting how he went from that 70 hours a week. He's at about 25 hours a week right now, loves what he does. He's combined passion. He does love trails, loves running, loves biking, but he's combined passion in an arena where there is a demand for his services, even if it's kind of a narrow demand, and even if you have to look for a bit. So his advice is to both don't just follow your passion and dreams, make sure that there's a viable economic pathway or trail forward. So I think I love this. Randy from Trailscape, and go get him, builder. Welcome to the Business Builder Way podcast, where we help business builders grow leadership skills and wisdom and stay grounded through hero stories. So let's get after it. Hey, Randy, welcome to the Business Builder Way. It's really great to have you today.
Nice to be with you, Wayne.
I've got your website up here. If anybody wants to look you up, you are a business builder. You've built a business that, as soon as I heard about it from our mutual friend, Chris Ramey, I was like, man, I want to interview Randy and get to tell his story. So you're the founder of Trailscape. And for anybody who's not watching the YouTube video, if you're on audio, I've got the Trailscape website up, and it says your land, your trail, your legacy. We build trails that make inaccessible land enjoyable and fire resistant. You're in California, so fire resistant in the West is really important. And so if you would, Randy, tell us a bit about the business as it exists now. We'll be switching time frames a bit as we tell your story,
Okay.
but if you would, tell us about the business you have now, the people, the work that you're doing, where you're at, all those things, whatever comes to mind.
Okay. Well, first, slide that image up a little bit so we can see the whole turn.
Picture of a trail and there's a turn on it. Okay. Yep. And at the top of it.
So what's nice about it is it's not just a U-turn, it's actually an omega shape, which makes it so that if you're on a bicycle, you get kind of a pre-turn and you can put your tires up on the bank if it was a bank turn. And they're designed to drain without eroding, as well as being kind of a delightful experience running or walking or whatever. Your hills, your legacy. So many of our clients, you'll have 5, 10, 20, 50 acres, and they'll have oftentimes no trail at all. There might not be a road or anything on it. So it's just the land is really just a privacy break and a fire hazard, and doesn't really give them much delight. So we get on their land and just provide them with a beautiful access. And we build our trails typically at about 5%, which is just an easy way to go. You can run down, you can run up. You're not having to hit your brakes if you're riding too much on a bicycle. But we're located in Roseville, California, which is about 15 miles east of Sacramento and about 100 miles west of Tahoe. I don't know that Sacramento or this area is a wonderful region, but it's close to some pretty neat things. We're close to the coast. We're close to San Francisco Bay Area as well as Tahoe. So I was able to ski a little over 30 days this year, most of them just popping up for the day because it's only about an hour drive. So that's been a delight to me. Our customers are primarily people that have land, 10 acres or more in the hills, because if it was flat land, then anybody could dig it. And then are wealthy enough so they have a nice, usually a pretty nice estate. So the beautiful thing is that we're working with kind of the top 1% of people, and they tend to be smart and surprisingly generous and easy to communicate with. And over 15 years. We've only had 3 times where I ultimately didn't get the last check, which out of about 600 clients, that's a pretty good form. I have to be, careful in other arenas to realize I have to be a bit more shrewd than in my own arena because the people are just so sophisticated.
Yeah, given that we were looking at a trail and dirt going uphill, is again on your website just kind of helps guide us through how the company is right now. So you've got this really clearly spelled out process on your website, how it works, connect with us, plan an estimate, build the trail, enjoy. So can you tell us, you've built about 600 trails, you work with people who have 10, maybe 50 acres, you put this trail, when you said 5% grade, so even though it might be very hilly and might be hard to go right up the hill, straight up over the hill, because the way you grade it out with those omega turns, et cetera, makes it doable. So that makes sense to me. Can you tell us a little bit more about the connect with us, plan an estimate? What's that process like? And do you do all that personally, or do you have designers on your team that go out and look at sites, or is it Zoom and aerial photographs
Okay.
in today's world?
The first thing is we think of terms of grade in 2 ways. One is what's the lay of the land? Is it 20% or is it 100%? 100% would means 10 feet this way and 10 feet this way. And we deal with percentages typically, not degrees, and degrees are usually about half. So about 45% would be about 22 degrees, somewhere in there. I think there's a plus or minus 5% in there. But so the tread grade, we like to generally put it about 5. And if somebody wanted us to do it at 10%, I might say, hey, I'm just not interested. But usually by the time the conversation's done, they're saying, oh, I get it. We don't want it to be so steep. The reason for keeping it mild is for the user experience, as well as if at 10%, it's very difficult to get the water to run off the trail, and it's water that's running down the trail that really rips it up. We were pretty happy with this, with the being real conservative this way. Was we got pounded by rain year before last. I mean, it was an amazing year in California, and actually this last year we got a lot of rain also. But out of the 600 miles of trail that we built, we only got about 10 calls of people saying, hey, we've got some erosion. And when we checked them out, only 2 of those were from water running down the trail, which is the part that we can control. And the other ones were water came across the trail and just ripped it out. So we were very pleased about that. And our guys are very specific about making sure that it drains. We make it so the trail drains about every 40 feet or so. So in terms of the process, we're getting out to clients using postcards and ads and magazines. Frankly, we haven't had that much luck with people getting the idea from us to build a trail online. If they have the idea, they can find us. And since trail building is a pretty small industry, we're usually first or second in their search. But in terms of getting people to see our product and go, gosh, honey, that's a great idea, almost never happens online. They're just not finding us. And we've tried various ways, but they do find us through the postcard. The postcards they'll go to our website and they'll come in from there, usually through the contact page. I will I ask for their address. So when I talk to them, I've already pulled up their property lines in CalTopo, transferred those lines from CalTopo to Google Earth, and I've been able to fly around and kind of get a feel for what they're looking at. And then I'm just interested in what do they want to do that isn't obvious. Usually it's, hey, there's a stream here, there's a view here. A lot of that stuff is obvious, but they may have preferences as to what they want. And I'll be asking questions like, based on their age and stage, they have grandkids, who do they want to attract to the property? Sure. Because there's what I call the flavor of the trail, where we can make the trail meander and undulate enough to get the water off the trail with a fairly, what I'd call a mundane flow. But someone might want something more exciting for bicycling, so that the trail can be exciting at 15 miles an hour, and because it's moving, rather than you have to go 40 to get the excitement for those of us that like that adrenaline boost. So what I'm able to do, and then I also overlay topo, 40-foot topo into Google Earth. So I'm able to lay out a trail that'll be pretty close to what will be built in moderate terrain. The more radical the terrain gets, the less likely that my approach is going to work, because it's always more gnarly, especially in the ravines, than it looks like on Google Earth. So I know that going in. But if all I knew was the elevation at the bottom and the top, I could just divide that by 0.05 and tell you about how long that trail is going to be.
Sure.
What I wouldn't know is how many turns there's going to be. And usually by the time we get out there, we're going to add a few turns and it ends up being a little shorter than we think. So for the most part, we're able to estimate without going out. And then we will write up the agreement for plus or minus 15%, because it's always a little bit different. And with that, we just got to build some trust. And one thing that I think I'm pretty good at is being able to gain the client's trust pretty quickly. I mean, at the age that I am, as long as we've been doing it, and maybe because of some Toastmasters, and if you're not much of a public speaker, Matt, I'd say go do Toastmasters for a year. It's fantastic for just learning how to communicate well and organize your thoughts on the fly and so forth. So I'm able to get their trust pretty quickly. And it is a little bit of a sales job to get them to go to contract without being about going out. There's almost always a, hey, well, don't you want to come out? Well, yes, but there's some logistics challenges to, if I go out and lay out the trail, there's somebody else is going to build it. So we have a disconnect there. I'd much rather have the trail builder meet with the owner and do it that way. I like to feel the owner. And sometimes we'll build a trail and we'll never even meet the owner. They're flying around and they're multi-billionaires. But we really like to touch the owner so that we can get a feel for, just by watching them walk, we can tell what kind of trail they want. And do they have grandkids, and how to blend that flavor of the trail so it's custom to them. And what they have now is a ski out trail. And I don't know if you've ever looked at real estate in a place like Park City or something, but if you've got a $1 million condo that's near the ski area that you have to get in your car to go to the area, but that same condo is $2 million if you can ski in, ski out. So to be able to leave your house without having to load up the bicycles and so forth, it's a beautiful thing. And it's something that a very small percentage of people actually have a significant trail on their land. So it's quite a wonderful process. And what's neat is that we build a great product, but we don't get nitpicked because we know so much more than the client that they're not going to be in a mode of, hey, what about this? What about that? So when we're walking the trail, it's kind of a skip in the woods, not a punch list. And we'll have situations where Eric, one of our lead trail builders, says, Randy, you can't believe it. I was taking them out for a walk and they both started crying. They were so happy.
Sure.
I mean, it's a significant improvement that we're making to their land, where instead of pushing through the brush or climbing up the hill and breathing hard and all that, they're able to walk at a 5% grade, which is right in that accessibility range. In fact, it's lower than what an accessible ramp, I think, can be up to 12%. We're at 5%. So almost everybody can walk full speed without having to get out of breath. And with that, there's some social benefits to not having a situation where one person is saying, come on, can't you go faster?
Sure.
Or wait for me. Everybody can pretty much walk a 5% grade normally, unless they're really elderly. I mean, an older person that is in decent shape can navigate that. So
Nice.
then we go to contract. The DocuSign comes through pretty quickly, and then we schedule it. And then I think a lot of your passion is about not getting stressed out and owning a business with and enjoying life. And so I'm pretty careful about not scheduling the work way out ahead. So the way this works is that we'll give you a call Thursday or Friday the week prior and just say, hey, is next week a good time for you? And then we'll begin from there, because trying to schedule and push, it's too much work. And there's kind of this, we just don't know what's going to happen. And it really comes to, it's arrogant to plan too far ahead. It's as if I'm God. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen and how it's going to go. And that too is a little bit of a sales job in getting them comfortable with the idea of, hey, I think it's going to be about a month or two, but usually whatever I think it's going to be, we can usually get to you quickly because we've got 5 crews and we can get through the work pretty quickly.
Well, and I guess
So I think
a trail is a bit of a want, not a need. And a lot of things that we believe to be needs are not needs either, but it makes sense to me that you could have that type of flexibility. And yes, absolutely. So for anybody listening, I've heard a couple things. One is you really look at your marketing and you have an idea of the difference between somebody who hadn't thought about having a trail on our land, that I hadn't thought about that, versus somebody who's like, let's have a trail on our land. I wonder who could do it for us. That's very perceptive. And then this piece of, to minimize stress for you and the client both, like we can't schedule it. It just, but we give you an idea. And there's a number of things I hear that you build in, like plus or minus 15%, and taking this piece of plus or the schedule roughly this. Yeah, I can see how that would help your lifestyle as a business owner. for sure.
And it is, I mean, that trust thing is important because they're going to be getting into a contract plus or minus 15%. You know, are we going to be the guys that are going to maximize that? Or it's like, and so I have to,
Right.
share with them. Half the time the trail can be less than that. And I'll say something like, I'm not trying to lowball and I'm not trying to pad this thing. I'm trying to hit the center of the target, but I'm not there. So we need a little room to move. And that's usually a pretty good approach. And about
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, it works. And then we'll have some situations where they'll press for, they want to see us. And then I'll typically charge for the special trip
Sure.
so that they're having to weigh it out. And, or I'll try to say, well, tell you what, why don't we, rather than just come out and look at the land, why don't you agree to have us flag it? And so there might be a $2,000 or $3,000 fee for us to flag the trail. And at least we're then getting one step closer to building it.
Sure.
And I think only one time we had somebody where we flagged the trail and it didn't go ahead.
Sure.
You know, once they're committed, I think there's a principle that says that people are much more concerned about not losing money than they are about gaining money.
Of
So
course.
to lose that feels, kind of they just don't want it. Something that I didn't mention when we were showing that initial slide is the fire breaks. And for a few years, we weren't really marketing based on the fire breaks, but we realized that it was a big deal. So it made us say, all right, I proclaim myself an essential business during COVID
Sure.
because we do fire breaks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you think that a 5 foot wide trail, what's that going to do? Well, in high winds, it will do nothing. The fire would jump over a 5 lane freeway. But in normal winds, the fire will come up, run out of fuel, and stop. And we actually had 7 homes saved in what we called the glass fire, which was a huge fire about 5 years ago, where the fire came up to our trail and stopped in 7 different cases. And it could have been there were some fire persons on the trail stopping. And in many cases, it'll just come up and stop. And they would usually wait until it got all the way up to the house. So we've got some photographs of where the black comes down and we can see the architecture in the house. It was a pretty sweet thing. It was a kind of a tear-inducing moment to realize that our trails actually have that goodness also of saving people's homes and maybe even lives.
And having seen some firefighters do a controlled burn and establishing the initial pathway and then doing these short little back burns off of the trail, I can imagine that if somebody had a trail like that, it just makes their job so much easier to get started with something instead of having to rake all the debris and everything to have a starting point, right?
Right. And just to be able to access it instead of having to pound through brush with all the stuff they're carrying, they can do a 5% trail and get down to it. It's a luxury.
Oh, that's true too, right? The 5% thing comes back in, doesn't it? It's awesome. So in thinking about your business and thinking about, okay, so you go out and you work with these people, what states do you work in? California is the key.
We're licensed in California only. There's a few states that don't require licensing, like Montana. So we've done some work in Montana.
Okay.
We've had a couple of people outside the state that have invited us for something specific, but we stay pretty much in California and Montana.
I have a brother in Montana, so awesome. And just to give us a price range, like what's the ballpark? 10 acres, 50 acres, people get these trails. Like how big are these projects that you're doing?
I mean, assuming it's rugged terrain, which it almost always is. So we're going to have like, say 50% slopes, which are, if that's 150 is in here, that would mean if we were digging a 5 foot wide trail, it would have about a 3 foot high cut. And generally on a 10-acre parcel, we can get about 1 mile of trail.
Okay.
So on smaller parcels, if someone had 100 acres, it would make more sense to maybe have 4 or 5 miles of trail. If we tried to put 10 miles, it would just be too dense. And just kind of an average number would be somewhere around, between $40,000 and $60,000 per mile, given, how difficult it is. So there would be some creek crossings that would include masticating both sides, the brush, both sides of the trail. We have this about a 3 foot by 3 foot box that it's like a mower, and we can just reach out and it just grinds up anything less than about an inch in diameter and just leaves it on the ground. So we've got not only a 4 to 5 foot wide trail, but about 5 foot either side. So it ends up being about a 15-foot fire break.
Nice.
And all that's included in that rough number.
So that's good. 40 to 60,000 per mile, 10 acres. That gives people an idea of what they're looking at. Of course, lots of more details. So you've told us a little bit about marketing, a little bit about sales, a little bit about the actual work, constructing. I'm on your webpage again, and here's this excavator, and it has a rock hammer on it, a mini excavator with a rock hammer at the moment. And you said it also has, and a thumb, I see, to be able to grab things. So you got a lot going on there. a lot of capability. You mentioned this tool that you can get off and masticate. What, that's not a word I use a lot, but that has to do with like brush, like grinding it down and things like
Right.
that.
So it's kind of like chewing, masticating. It's a more of a dental term, but
Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
So it's like chewing it up and getting everything. So the other thing on this page that I'm looking at for those listening says our trail builders are artists as much as they are technicians. Our clients love our trail builders almost as much as they love our trails. And I see marketing and maintenance, logistics manager, trail lead operator. There's like 6 people on your site. Eric, you mentioned, who's a lead trail builder. You got a few of those lead trail builders, Eric, David, Jeff. So like tell us about your team. And by the way, I have a son who loves the outdoors. And I was telling him I'm interviewing you today. And I was telling the whole story. I'm like, here's this guy in California created this company where they go out and build trails, which is really cool. You probably attract a unique individual that wants to come be part of that.
Yeah, they've got to be, yeah, tough and creative. And I mean, the creativity comes with, when you're laying out the trail, do I go above this tree or, below this tree? Oh, look there's a view. Let's pan that view. There's a weighing out. And then there's the technical part of kind of weighing out. Boy, that'll be tougher, but it'll be better. And just, it's a, problem. The whole thing's a kind of a problem solving mixed with creativity. And then the build part is, I'd say it's probably more technician, but it's going to be easy for a while, and then you're going to run into something that's tough. You're going to run into rock or a tree or tree roots or something, a creek. There's going to be some problem that will then slow you down. So the challenge is, and the more the efficiency is, being able to work through and not have these things stop you. So have the right tools in your little toolbox and make sure that you're starting with fuel in the morning. And so you're just getting through. It's kind of like life. You're just continually going through and getting stopped and working your way around. We pay our guys pretty well. The trail builders get a percentage of the job assigned to labor, and anything that's left over after they built it, the lead trail builder gets to keep or distribute amongst the guys that helped him. So they end up, if they're doing well, they'll end up getting or earning about $80 an hour, and about half of that would be their standard wage. So I like to pay them well, and they're very happy. They're very creative. They're mostly working by themselves. We will have guys that will kind of float to be what I call a second on the job, but most of the work is done either with an excavator or a little dozer, and it's lone work. And so one guy will work for 8 days and then go home for 5. Another guy works for 3 days a week. Most of them are just the standard 5 days a week. But for the most part, they love their work and they're quite independent. I just have them, hey, Sunday nights, I want you to tell me where you are and what you intend to do and what equipment you have. And it's a text that they're all communicating together. So they're thinking, oh, so you've got this. Hey, do you think that I can swing by and pick that up? And it's such a simple tool for them to be communicating with me and them all at the same time. And then my primary job, and gosh, I have also a full-time mechanic now.
Yeah.
Shane just changed my life. Look at
I'll
my
bet.
fingers aren't.
No more banging knuckles for you.
And there's no grease on my fingernails. It's just, quite, for a while I was doing everything, marketing, building, replacing and all that. And then I started hiring, guys to do the builds, but was continuing with the logistics, which is really the hardest part of the job to, evac. We had starter go bad at a dozer on the other side of a creek and he had to change it was awful. And that would have been me. Right. So I'm super happy to not be doing that anymore.
That leads to more skiing. I don't always spend as much time talking about the current business, but I'm just super interested. It's cool and different and unique. And so there may be people out there that would want to contact you. Do they have to move? I assume that everybody's kind of local so that they can come to the shop or come to the yard and then go out.
Well, yes and no. We've got one guy's actually floating. He and his girlfriend broke up and he's just, I'm going to sleep in my truck on the non-work days. But since the jobs are not local, they're always staying in a motel. So he'd be 5 or 6 days in a motel anyway. And so he just kind of unplugged and is going around. But most of them, they live in the Roseville area and then go out to the jobs in Napa, Sonoma, which is about a 2-hour drive. And it's in about 6 or 7 hours to get to Southern California. And we do that also.
So there's the company and there's how it is. But how did you start this? When did you start it? There's been a building of this company and the reputation to get to here. When did you start it? What was the story of starting it? How did you get here, Randy?
Well, I was working with my father from 2000 to 2007 approximately. We were real estate analysts. Then our customers were developers and builders. And I was a report writing and I was decent at it, but I never really had much passion for it. And I was looking for, hey, what's my next gig? What's going to happen after this? Well, we had a project where It was a 1,300-acre project with about 400 units of active adult. And there was about 1,000 acres of ag land that couldn't be developed. And I'm looking at this as a guy who loved trails and running and cycling and so forth, and thinking, hey, let's build a bridge over the Tuolumne River and build them up an 8-mile trail system. And my sense is that it's going to add a lot more value to this community than it's going to cost. And this internal meeting, I said, well, do a little analysis on that. How much is it going to cost? And sell us on the idea. So I called a guy from the Professional Trail Builders Association, the PTBA, if you want to look that up. They're actually pretty active in the East. And I talked to the guy that happened to be the president of the organization. He says, well, gosh, you sound like an enlightened developer. Why don't you come speak at our trail building conference? So since I was actually commuting to Southern California to do this work with my father, Reno was just across the border, about 2 hours from me, from Roseville. So I go to this to speak on the development. It was really the value of trails to developments was the topic. And I kind of looked around and said, boy, these guys are making a living building trails. What a neat thing to do. I mean, everybody loves trails. This is in 2007, and the real estate market was about to crash. And I knew that our business was going to just really hit the tank. So I went back the next year hanging a shingle of, hey, I'm a trail designer for developers. And looking back, it was clearly a fake it till you make it thing. And I was able to pick up one client. So I went out and laid out a trail, and he kept asking me about equipment and all this trail, and I had no clue. It was pretty wild. Anyway, but I had a contractor's license from my early days that had been on hold for all these years. There was a public job that went to bid. I had a license, and I knew a guy that knew how to build trails. So we bid on it and won a 12-mile trail. And that was really the beginning of the business. And Eric, the trail builder, he tells the story. I knew him from church and so forth. And I told him, hey, Eric, I'm planning to start a trail building business. And the way he goes, well, and he kind of looks at me like, well, okay, like, good luck with that. Right. And a short time later, he asked me to borrow my excavator, and he built a pump track in his backyard. And soon after that, he started working for me. And he's been now with me for, I think, at least 10 years. And still just continues to love the business. But little by little, at first I was, doing the digging, I was doing the marketing, I was doing the repairs, the whole thing. I think I borrowed a truck. I mean, it was actually shortly after we started this business, my wife left me, and it was just brutally tight. But little by little, was able to kind of free up weekends and so forth. So it was 5 or 6 years of just a lot of work. And now I'm probably working 25 hours a week. And I manage the business all right from this location. And I'm primarily just a salesman at this point, which is, I like it. I'm pretty good at it. And I also have another estimator. So on the smaller jobs, I can pass, which I do find the small jobs take as much effort for the salesman as the big jobs. So I can hand those to him, and he's able to handle those and all the maintenance jobs. And I'll just kind of manage the larger ones that could be, some of these jobs could be $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. Those come by occasionally. So got to make sure and get those moved forward properly.
So how many hours do you, if you had a guess, during those initial years trying to get the thing going?
Yep, probably 70, especially when I take the tractor off the job, put it on the trailer, bring it to a site. The dozer was a kind of a unique looking machine. It wasn't just an excavator that everybody's seen before. So there was a lot of looky-looing to go on. So I'd always bring that on site. And it was just a long weekends, but we're only making money when the steel is digging dirt. So it was, those were hard days. And then if something broke, I only had one machine. So if that thing was down, there was no revenue created. But now we've got 4 dozers and 8 excavators. So if a dozer breaks, we just bring another one and take the other one back. It's really quite a wonderful season.
4 dozers, 8 excavators, a mechanic who probably has a support vehicle, 3 primary trail builders. Is that right?
Right now we've got 4 plus a maintenance guy. We've had as many as 5 at a time, but we don't have a lot of backlog now. And we are rolling into, I'm doing a certain amount of postcards every month. So the flow of work, I don't have a huge backlog, but it does seem to be coming in fairly consistently.
So you've added more trail builders over the years and more equipment as you've had demand. What's ahead? What do you see ahead as far as building this business, or will you build the business, or is this like, man, this is nice and I think we'll keep it like this? Or
my challenge now is it's time for me to start finding a successor. I'm 65 this month. And so I plan to stay in the business probably till I'm 75. But it would be nice to do less. And I need to dial in the guy that can primarily be in this mode of selling and managing, which doesn't necessarily come from the field, but it could. The sales part is the part that I've had the most difficult time replacing. So we'll see how that flies. The real challenge that I've got is that, I do want to do less in the business, and I'd like to be relaxing more. And I'm finding that I'm getting a little less interested in it, which will just naturally, the revenue will just tend to fall. Well, if the value of the business is a multiplier of gross revenue or net, then there's motivation to really stay on top of the expenses as well as keep the revenue up, so that when it comes time to sell it, it could make the difference between whether it sells for $1 million or 3. And that's a serious amount of money, moving towards retirement. So getting somebody that some new energy in here to be, how about we do this and let's analyze this. And I've got a word out to a guy that's William Jessup University's just about 5 miles from here, and he runs the master's department for business. And so I'm kind of hoping somebody will come out of that. It'll be interesting to see. It could be someone that it might cost me 60 or 70 or $100,000 a year to have somebody along just learning and not really being all that productive initially. And right, that significant amount of money. But at the same time, if that means that I can, keep the volume of the business up, that's money well spent.
So just a few more minutes here, and I think this is important. Let's pretend that your successor is listening to this podcast, right? Who are they? How would you describe? I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Who are they, and why should they come and talk with you and have a conversation? What is so awesome about this business and this work that you do?
Oh, well, what's so awesome about it is that it's simple and it's outdoors. And for a lot of the work is outdoors, or it's got a mix. So for someone that is not wanting to be in front of their computer all the time, it's beautiful that way. The clientele is wonderful. The type of person that we've at least hired, we've got a fantastic staff of people that are trustworthy, and they've all got credit cards, and occasionally I'll review the credit card bills. Like, nobody's abusing it. It's just quite a beautiful place to be. The hard part is finding clients, because it's a very tiny piece of the world that has large land in the hills, and it has the money to be able to, for $50,000 to be easy. It's a teeny little, a 1/10 of 1% kind of a person. So we have to do a lot of marketing. In terms of who it would be, somebody that would be somewhat mechanically inclined, hopefully, because there's a lot of problems to solve. The guys in the field are very competent, but they do enjoy being able to call me up and say, hey, this is my situation. What do you think? I'm kind of thinking this, but what do you think about that? To be able to have that work is nice, although it's probably not required. And it would be hard for a guy to come in and actually be better than a trail builder. But I was one, so that helps. Having some background in sales, and I tried to sell insurance way back when and was a complete imbecile at it. But just getting the training was fantastic. Knowing things like, if a husband and a wife are talking to each other and they're deciding, it's like, what do you do? Do you pop in? And so it's like, no, you shut up. You let them work it out. And probably the difficult thing for me was being able to talk in these kinds of numbers like they're nothing, $50,000. So a key point in our conversation will be, I'll show them the plan, I'll show them the estimate, and I'll say, now this is an important moment, because I need to know from you, are you saying, oh, that's so much money, or gosh, that's not very much, maybe, shall we do more? Because we can adjust this, we can adjust the scope to meet what you want, because this is your plan, this is not my plan. So being able to get comfortable talking in those numbers takes a bit. It took me a while. It took me a long time to get comfortable making the ask. So all that blend, and then they'd have to be someone we're going to get along for 5 or 10 years while they figure this thing out. And the entrepreneur people are not necessarily all that easy to get along with. I think I've been classified as adult ADHD. And you think one of the comments was, where you find ADHD, adult ADHDs? Well, they're either unemployed or they're self-employed, because we're kind of quirky. We're just kind of a quirky bunch.
Sure. And I mean, there's a good vibe about you, the work you do. You speak respectfully about your employees. You speak respectfully with both gratitude and also an understanding of who they are about your clients. So you've got a lot going for you in terms of being able to mentor somebody. And You said the people that are on your team, they're trustworthy. You don't really have to review their credit card, but you do. You look at it every once in a while just to make sure. Well, a mentor of mine, his name was Warren Lewis, got me in this coaching thing. He said, leaders get the people they deserve, which could go both ways. Right.
Right.
And I'm sure maybe you have some story of somebody somewhere along the way who didn't quite fit, but it has gotten into this core group of people. So you're surely doing something right. The last question I want to ask you, Randy, is, so I work with business builders, people, I would say the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, but there's not actually many of them anymore. So it's more like somebody who owns an integrative medical practice, somebody that owns a marketing agency, somebody who's a contractor of various sorts. These are a plumber or whatever. These are people that I work with. You're a business builder. You've built this thing. What is your superpower, do you think, as a business builder? As an entrepreneur would be the other common phrase for that.
Well, first I hear this follow your passion thing, which you hear is like, oh, well, I want to be a candlestick maker because that's my passion. Well, there's got to be a market. So blending the passion with a market is key. So my wife's an artist, and it's hard to find, she's got this passion for art and writing, but it's really hard to find a market. So I love the business. I love the trails. I started with a passion for the actual object, has been helpful. But then I find I do like the business part of it. I like the leadership part of it, which I know I could do quite a bit better. But I mean, they're independent guys, so we don't really have to get together that much. But I think it would be good for me to spend more time with them, just to encourage them in what they're doing, and so they're not alone so much.
Yeah, maybe that's your superpower, is there's this like balance. There's this, you talked about the trail and how there's artistry to building the trail and balancing. You got to get it to where it's going, but then incorporating the aesthetics and beautiful moments. So what I hear you doing is there is a real strong sense about you, about balance and hard work, balance with artistry, and that like groundedness is something I would like, groundedness, and you got that.
And I suppose in the sales part, I'm naturally enthusiastic, and also particularly enthusiastic about trails and what I know the trail will do for them. So I don't have to fake it, and I don't have to fake my enthusiasm. So because I'm enthusiastic and it brings out a smile, I think they just naturally, I'm more likable in this Zoom format. So it's helpful to not be having to fake. I mean, if I could be selling, dumpster services or something, and it would be a viable business, but how am I going to get a passion for that? I'm not.
Well, and then even in sales, and the way you describe that, you've got a real groundedness there too, where it's like, look, you're telling people we are at a pivotal moment. And what I heard was like, I'm not completely attached to the outcome, but I want to help you see this is a pivotal moment. Here's a dollar figure. We've kind of dreamed together. We understand what this might do for your property. Maybe you visualize through, oh yeah, there's a trail, and seeing some pictures on your website. And now like it's there, we're just going to have to decide, and I'll help you decide. I'm here. Like, I'm like your guide to help you make these decisions, but we got to look at it soberly. And that's what you're doing.
No, absolutely. The client is going to love the product. And one of the things I'll say to them, so I want you to prepare, I want to set some expectations here. Whatever you think this trail is going to be, it's going to be much better. That's the most common thing that I hear from clients is, I thought this was going to be pretty good. This is just so much better than I ever imagined. And they'll kind of look at me like, really, you're going to set expectations like that? And it's a wonderful thing to be able to say that with total confidence. That's the case.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's a great place to stop. Randy, thanks so much for coming and sharing more about the company you've built and the work that you do. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
All right, very good. Nice to spend the time with you.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning into the Business Builder Way podcast. If this episode spoke to you, click that subscribe button and share it with a friend. That's how this message gets out into the world. If it is helpful for us to have a short conversation, I'd love to do that. Send me an email at wayne@businessbuildercamp.com.